Good evening. My name is Valerie Marshall, and welcome to my TED Talk. Nina Simone's lyrics, "To be young, gifted, and black," spoke to a generation of young black people who had their lives ever before them. On August 17th, 1969, Nina walked onto a stage and spoke to a crowd of 50,000 young lives. And this is what she said: "Young, gifted, and black. Oh, what a lovely, precious dream, to be young, gifted, and black. Open your heart to what I mean. In the whole world, there's 1,000,000 boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black, and that's a fact. You are young, gifted, and black. We must begin to tell our young, there's a world waiting for you. Yours is the quest that's just begun." Those lyrics encouraged that crowd of 50,000 to push forward into their destiny, to dream big, bold dreams, to achieve great things, to go where no man is gone. Because after all, you are young, gifted, and black. You can do anything. There is no mountain insurmountable. Today, I think about those words in a very different way. As a public health professional, I see what Nina sees. I see the talent. I see the enormous gifting within my community. I see a generation that has the potential to achieve scientific and medical breakthroughs, to write eloquently, to speak boldly, to push the very limits of possibility. But I also see an existential threat to the black community. That existential threat is becoming worse and worse and worse. And what is it? Well, how about I put a spin on Nina's rendition? To be young, gifted, and fat. Oh, what a lovely nightmare. To be young, gifted, and fat. Open your heart to what I mean. In the whole world, there's 1,000,000 boys and girls who are young, gifted, and fat. And that's a fact. That's a fact. You are young, gifted, and fat. We must begin to tell our young, there's a world that you will miss. Yours is the quest that will end early. Obesity. It's a killer in every sense of the word. It not only robs our youth of their health, their ability to be well, to be whole, to be healthy, but it will rob them of their potential. Someone in our community has the cure for cancer, the cure for HIV, but we may never see it due to obesity. And it's not fair. And if you have this dreadful disease, it is not your fault. Everywhere I go, I see a generation who's becoming more and more obese, morbidly obese. Why is this the case? Let's explore. I live in Prince George's County, Maryland. Some parts of Prince George's County are lavish. Golf courses, which indicate wealth and affluence. And in other places in Prince George's County, I see an over-proliferation of fast food and nail salons, which is indicative of poverty. So in Prince George's County, we see the perfect picture of the tale of two cities. Let's explore. Children in the first city have access to grocery stores with an abundance of nutrient-rich foods, parks and trails for hiking, and areas within their community and neighborhoods where they can play and ride bikes freely without fear of crime or violence. Their households may not be rich, but there is a stable income available for all of life's necessities. Children in the second city, however, face circumstances of polar opposite. Their neighborhoods are void. As I drive through their neighborhoods, I see nothing. I see nothing. I see no parks, no grocery stores, no places to purchase high quality, nutrient dense food. The foods that will keep a generation from becoming young, gifted, and fat. I see nothing. I see nothing. But people live here. Children live here. Teenagers, adults, the elderly live here. What is this place I see? Is this a food desert? A food desert is a term that is broadly used to describe the lack of healthy and affordable food options, particularly in communities of color. This conjures up images of a dry, arid terrain. But baby, this ain't no desert. My people are full of life and vitality. My people sing, we dance. We live life to the fullest. Even when they slap a low income label on us. Even when they tell us we're low SES. My people, we may not be young, but we are gifted and we are black. This ain't no food desert. Food desert implies something that occurred naturally. This was done on purpose. This is food apartheid. Somebody did this on purpose. There is no food here on purpose. Food apartheid describes how racism and political power affect our food system, both nationally and domestically, and as well as internationally. Apartheid refers to a system of racial segregation imposed in South Africa from the late 1940s to the early 1990s. Food Desert says this was an accident, this was spontaneous. Food Apartheid says this was intentional, and that there's a system behind what we are seeing in our communities. It is an oppressive, unequal, racialized system of power that governs food consumption, production, and most importantly, distribution. Research has shown that years which turn into decades, which turn into centuries of disinvestment, that means a withdrawal from our communities versus a deposit. Historically redlined neighborhoods have limited food access, which means that there are systematic inequalities based on racism, discrimination, leading to disparities in food security. This is intentional withholding of food from low-income communities based on the color of our skin. The New Deal enacted by President Franklin D. Roosevelt was a series of reforms that took place between 1933 and 1938. The New Deal was intended to relieve the needy, provide economic recovery, and financial reform. It essentially made housing more affordable. But unfortunately, most of the homes were being built in exclusively white neighborhoods. Home loans were incredibly difficult for Black Americans to secure in comparison to white Americans. Thus, the practice of redlining, which is when you refuse to insure mortgages in and around Black neighborhoods. Redlining was so named because it was a literal red line drawn to distinguish Black neighborhoods and labeled them as hazardous. As a result of these circumstances, minority groups were driven to the most undesirable, unattractive parts of towns and cities, forced to live in poor housing, which made it unappealing for major supermarkets to build their locations in those areas. Thus, poor neighborhoods over time became inundated with liquor stores and convenience stores. This was likely due to the discriminatory practices of how neighborhoods have been historically structured. The prevalence of these liquor stores and convenience stores in black and brown communities cannot be explained by sheer demand because black and brown communities report lower drinking than white communities. People often think that black and brown communities live in low income housing or eat poor diets because they lack fortitude, because they are lazy. This is not the case. We are a hard working race of people. We are young, gifted, and black. The people are not to blame, but rather the structural racism that has been put into place. It is a myth that lower income communities want the oversaturation, the overproliferation of fast foods and convenience foods within their communities. No, what we want is access to quality, affordable foods that will help our families thrive, just like the white communities. Food apartheid has birthed a health crisis that, if left unchecked, will continue to produce massive morbidity and premature mortality in black and brown communities. Jesse Lunford, an assistant professor in the Department of Nutrition at Metropolitan State University of Denver, says, "Our food system is tied directly to profits," and I quote, "which necessarily requires companies to manage costs while raising prices. Nowhere in that equation is suitability for human health considered. So healthful foods like fresh produce, lean meats, and whole grains have become too expensive for low-income populations, and they're even becoming too expensive for middle-class populations. A healthy diet of grass-fed meats, low-fat dairy products, and organic vegetables is becoming more and more out of reach every single day. So the cheapest way to eat is what's closest and available. So that's probably going to be fast food. The presence of fast food is usually dependent upon the race versus the income of a community. And this is the result of capitalism that followed the flight of white people from inner cities. Following the civil rights movement into the 1960s, white families moved from inner cities to suburbs out of the fear of continued racial uprising. And with that white flight went the grocery stores, went large segments of urban job markets. To this day, many low-income communities of color are still struggling due to the consequences of white flight. Following white flight, McDonald's capitalized on a very bad situation. They did this by expanding into the inner cities, but they also provided black ownership of franchises and used racially targeted marketing to increase demand upon black communities. So now what we see is that black communities have a disproportionately higher chance of developing nutritionally related chronic diseases. Oh, to be young, gifted, and fat. Obesity is common in low-income communities, not because of the quantity of food, but rather the quality. It's not the quantity, it's the quality. The food in low incomes is predominantly shelf-stable, most of which is derived from corn and soy ingredients. These foods are ultra-processed. They are enriched, which means that someone took a whole grain, pulverized it, stripped it of all of its ingredients, and then added the nutrients back into the food. This is called enriching food. And a side effect of enriched foods is weight gain. So, well, why would you do that? Why would you strip a product of its grain? Well, you do that is so that you can produce mass quantities. You can produce mass quantities and then take that pulverized pulp of material and make 10,000 different types of ultra-processed foods, which the body cannot digest. You take that and then you inundate it into brown and black communities. That's how a generation of children, of adolescents who are young, gifted, and black get a good portion of their diet from ultra-processed foods, which drives obesity. It's not your fault if you are facing this dreaded disease. So I can tell you from sheer memory what obesity will do to your body. I can tell you that it will cause diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, stroke, metabolic disease, kidney disorders, not to mention the strain on the musculoskeletal system. But what I cannot tell you is what obesity will do to the dreams, goals, and aspirations that you have set for yourself. I can tell you that if you are obese, your life expectancy will be cut short. But what I cannot tell you is what will happen to the vision, your goals. I cannot tell you that. I can tell you that by the year 2013, if not 2030 rather, if not properly mitigated, if not urgently addressed, 58% of those who are young, gifted, and black will be obese. But again, I say, this is a terrible disease of which you should not be ashamed. It is not your fault. The systems were set up for you to be obese. If you live in a community stricken by food apartheid, it is not your fault. However, with this message comes an urgent plea to action, an urgent call. Our community has run out of time. We are sitting on a proverbial ticking time bomb that is soon to implode. We are on an unsustainable trajectory. And with that said, there are a few things we must and must not do. We must not say to a community stricken by food apartheid, a community that is intentionally being withheld life-giving sustenance, we must not tell them, go eat your fruit and vegetables. It's ridiculous. We must not say to the chubby 10-year-old, you need to eat more broccoli. Surely if you ate more broccoli, you wouldn't be chubby and fat anymore. Surely if you exercised more, your problem would go away. No. We must realize that food apartheid is but one layer in a system. Systematic racism, as we peel back the layers, we begin to see how one issue affects another. So what we must say is that this is not your fault, baby. We must bring understanding and empathy to the table. Our system of food is broken. But what we must do is we must unite. Public health must unite with the community. Those living in a food apartheid, we must partner with community-based organizations to come together for innovative solutions. Gardens are a potential self-determined path to community health, healing, and well-being. The development of community gardens may be a response to structural oppression. Black people have used agriculture to develop self-determined communities. We can also address the issue of food apartheid plaguing marginalized communities by focusing our efforts towards food justice. Food justice addresses the long history of economic injustice and racial discrimination by increasing access to capital for communities of color to facilitate property ownership, including farmland. Food justice calls for reinvestment in education and job opportunities, specifically in neighborhoods historically discriminated against and thus denied access to healthy, affordable food. To fight obesity, we must be willing to recognize that our community is young, gifted, and black. Young, gifted, and black. Oh, what a lovely, precious dream. To be young, gifted, and black, open your heart to what I mean. Let us unite. Let us take one step forward, one step at a time, to fight obesity. To be young, gifted, and black. That is a fact. Thank you.